Okay, so let's get into it. We're doing a deep dive on the Obama presidency today, and it really is one of the biggest paradoxes in modern American politics.
It really is, because on one hand, you have these huge, truly structural policy wins. Things like healthcare reform, overhauling Wall Street.
And on the other hand,
Yeah.
just political devastation for his party. It's a tension that runs through all the source material we looked at.
Yeah, one historian put it perfectly. He said Obama was an effective policymaker, but not a tremendously successful party builder.
And that's exactly what we want to unpack for you. How do you square that circle? How can
Mm.
you pass something like the Affordable Care Act and still see your party just, well, decimated?
Right. We need to look at the specific policies and then the why. Why did the Democratic Party lose over a thousand legislative seats during his time in office?
It's this fundamental question, really. Can a policy win, no matter how big, actually last without the political success to back it up? So let's start with domestic policy. I think we have to begin with the two great legislative pillars of his time in office.
Absolutely.
First up, the Affordable Care Act. The ACA passed back in 2010,
And I think everyone remembers, it passed without a single Republican vote.
which, kind of set the stage for all the political fights to come right from the very beginning.
It did. But from a pure policy view, the ACA was trying to fix these deep structural flaws in the U.S. health system. It was all about market failure.
And the core of that was something called guarantee issue.
Mm.
So for you listening, what does that actually mean in practical terms?
It means an insurer could no longer look at your health history and say, nope, we're not covering you. Pre-existing conditions couldn't be used to deny you coverage.
Which was, that was life-changing for millions of people. It took away this huge financial risk.
A terrifying risk. And it also limited how much more they could charge you based on your age or if you smoked.
So policy-wise, a massive win for consumers. But politically, this is where the trouble started, isn't it? It fed that whole narrative of government overreach.
Absolutely. To make it work, the government had to regulate the insurance market pretty heavily. And that gave critics this really potent political weapon.
But the ECA wasn't just about getting people covered. There were also some really aggressive cost control ideas in there, weren't there?
Oh, yeah. A huge push on prevention. It eliminated copays and deductibles for a whole range of preventive services in Medicare. The idea was, keep people healthy now to save money later.
And what about the mechanisms they built to actually try to bend that cost curve down?
Well, that's where the Innovation Center at CMS came in. It was set up to be a long-term lab, basically, for testing new ways to pay for healthcare.
Moving away from paying for the volume of care to paying for the quality.
Exactly. And they also started penalizing hospitals if too many patients were readmitted right after being discharged. It put financial pressure on them to get things right the first time.
Okay, so let's move to the other big one, the response to the financial crisis. Dodd-Frank. Signed into law July 2010.
Right. And after the near total collapse of the financial system, the goals of that reform were actually beautifully simple.
Yeah, were they?
Just two things, really. One, limit the risk inside the system. And two, limit the damage when a huge firm fails. In other words, end taxpayer bailouts.
So how did they go about limiting that risk?
Well, they tried to drag the shadow banking system into the light. A big part of that was regulating derivatives, forcing them to be traded on open exchanges so everyone could see the prices.
And they also created this new category of institution.
Yes, the sci-fis, systemically important financial institutions.
Which is basically just government speak for too big to fail, right?
That's it. And because they got that label, they had to hold more capital, more of a safety buffer, and face much tougher oversight.
And that second goal, ending the bailouts, how'd they tackle that?
They created a new resolution authority. So if a sci-fi was failing, the FDIC could step in, take control, and unwind it in an orderly way, supposedly without needing taxpayer money.
But this is where the critique gets really, really sharp. Some argue that instead of fixing the problem, the law actually created something worse, a kind of a corporatist turn.
And that's the long-term view that's so critical. The argument is that the law never seriously tried to break up the biggest banks. In fact, by calling them sci-fis, it kind of gave them an implicit government guarantee.
So it didn't solve too big to fail, it just wrote it into the rule book.
Exactly. It made them too big to fail and too big to succeed against. It gave them a competitive edge.
And instead of clear rules, you've got this system of constant negotiation between regulators and the biggest firms.
Right. It basically enshrined regulatory discretion. Now, we should mention the Volcker Rule, which was a big concession.
That was the part that banned banks from proprietary trading, from gambling with their own money.
It was. But the definition was so slippery that its actual effect depended entirely on how regulators chose to interpret it, which again just reinforces that cozy relationship.
There was one clear positive step forward, though. The CFPB.
Absolutely. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That was a clean win. It's a separate watchdog, totally focused on protecting you from, say, predatory mortgage or credit card practices.
It's interesting. If you look at domestic policy, you see this centralization of power to manage these huge firms. And you see that exact same pattern in foreign policy,
With drone warfare.
with the institutionalization of drone warfare.
This was a huge change. The use of armed drones, especially outside of, official combat zones, just exploded under the Obama administration. What was the public's reaction to that?
Well, the program really lined up with what the public expected on security. Terrorism was consistently the #1 foreign policy concern for Americans.
And the polls showed overwhelming support for using military force to prevent attacks.
Overwhelming, something like 9 out of 10 Americans. So the public was really primed to support a tool that seemed effective and, crucially, low risk to American lives.
And the sources we looked at confirm that, from a counterterrorism perspective, drones were highly effective. Oh, without a doubt. I mean, documents found in Osama bin Laden's compound showed al-Qaeda was, and I'm quoting, crippled by the U.S. drone campaign.
Wow.
The psychological impact was huge. It forced operatives to stay inside, to stop moving, to not gather in groups, all the things you have to do to run a terrorist network.
But the program got so much criticism, from legal groups, from NGOs. Why did none of that really stick politically here at home?
This is a key insight from the sources. A lot of the critics just suffered from an insufficient understanding of the technologies of war.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they'd put out these reports with major technical errors. For example, a Human Rights Watch report on Yemen was titled Between a Drone and Al-Qaeda, but the event it focused on, which killed 41 civilians, wasn't a drone strike.
What was it?
It was a cruise missile attack from 2009. And when you confuse a multi-million-dollar cruise missile with a drone, you lose all credibility with policymakers.
It's also fascinating how little the public seemed to care about the legal justification for all this. The rationale kept shifting from Article 2 to the AUMF to this idea of historical gloss.
Historical gloss. And for you listening, that's a legal term that basically means the president claims authority because previous presidents have done similar things and nobody stopped them.
And the public debate just never got into those weeds.
Not at all. The analysis we saw suggests Americans are just very pragmatic. They cared about whether it worked against a real threat, not about the specific legal clause being used.
And what about internationally? There was disapproval, but did it matter?
The sources say it had little strategic consequence. Pew polls from 2014 still found that, 65% of nations had a favorable view of the U.S. Effectiveness just seemed to trump everything else.
Okay, so we've got major policy victories. A reformed financial system, more healthcare access, a new way to fight terrorism. But let's turn back to the politics, because this is where that paradox really starts to bite.
It really is. The political cost was just astronomical. Over the course of those 8 years, the Democratic Party lost more than 1,000 seats.
1,000 seats.
In state legislatures, governorships, Congress. Combined, more than under any other modern two-term president, it was a political tsunami.
So how? How does achieving all that policy success lead to that kind of political collapse? The sources point back to the very beginning, to the economic response. They call it the original sin.
Yes. Obama's own economic advisor, Christina Romer, she wanted a massive stimulus to guarantee a fast recovery. But others in the administration, like Lawrence Summers, pushed for a much smaller package.
They went for what they thought they'd get through Congress easily, but the result was a very slow, grinding recovery.
Precisely. And that slow recovery became the whole political story of the 2010 midterms. Instead of just hammering away on jobs, the administration pivoted really quickly to healthcare.
To this hugely divisive issue.
Right. And Republicans just ran on the sluggish economy and this idea that the stimulus only helped Wall Street.
And the result was a wipeout. They gained 63 seats and took control of the House.
And that lack of political support then hamstrung the rest of his presidency. One analyst said Obama kept choosing substance over politics, but without the politics, the substance couldn't be defended. The foundation was just too weak.
It's also wild to see the sources draw this line of continuity geopolitically between Obama and Trump. I mean, they seem like total opposites.
Their styles are, for sure, but the sources argued they were both responding to the same big shifts, the same geopolitical tectonic plates.
Like what?
Well, three things. The end of the Cold War, so no clear peer competitor, the rise of China, which drove Obama's pivot to Asia, and then just the long, long shadow of Iraq and Afghanistan.
So both presidents, in their own way, were trying to get America out of these forever wars.
Exactly. Both were against nation building. Now, Obama's approach was a light footprint, special forces, drones, diplomacy. Trump's was much more disdainful of alliances. But the core strategic pressure was the same.
But the real lesson here, the fragility of it all, comes late in his term. After losing Congress, he had to rely on executive actions for everything.
For DACA, for the Clean Power Plan on climate, yeah.
And the problem with an executive action is that it's so easily undone.
And that's the tragedy of it. His policy legacy and his political legacy became the same thing. Without a strong party or bipartisan support to protect his achievements, they were just vulnerable. It seems like he recognized that political failure because it's clearly driving the whole focus of his post-presidency.
With the Obama Foundation.
Yeah. The foundation is basically doing the work that his administration, you could argue, neglected. It's building that next generation of leadership, that political capital.
And what are some of the active programs there?
The Obama Leaders Program is the big one. They bring in people from all over the world, 203 leaders just in the 2024-25 cohorts, and train them on how to create change. It's a direct investment in that political infrastructure.
And they've had some real measurable success with the My Brother's Keeper Alliance, right?
Oh, absolutely. That program focuses on young men of color, and you can see the results. In Yonkers, New York, they helped raise the high school graduation rate for that group from 70% all the way up to 91%.
That's incredible.
It is. And then there's the Girls Opportunity Alliance, and of course, the Obama Presidential Center in Chicago is finally taking shape.
Yeah, the main museum building just reached its full height of 225 feet this year.
A major milestone.
So before we wrap this all up, there's a claim we saw circulating that we really need to fact-check for you. We saw posts claiming that Barack Obama had announced a comeback for 2028.
Right, through some kind of legal avenue or as a proxy candidate.
Can you clear that up?
We can. That claim is 100% false. We need to be very clear. The posts mention an exclusive interview on December 7, 2025. That is completely fabricated.
So no such interview ever happened?
No interview, no announcement. Our research confirmed this specific story came from a known source of AI-generated misinformation based overseas. The former president is term limited, and his focus is entirely on the foundation's work. #outro.
So to bring this all together, it is just such a study in contradiction. Obama's presidency was all about tackling these huge structural national problems: healthcare, finance, counterterrorism.
And yet, the sources are really clear. That laser focus on substance, without an equal focus on party building, left all those victories just dangerously exposed.
He had two paths to a lasting legacy, right? Bipartisan support, which he didn't get, or a strong political party to defend his work. And he didn't really build that either.
He achieved neither, not during his term.
Which leaves us with a final, I think, pretty provocative thought. And it comes out of that drone analysis.
Yeah. The thing that really sticks with me from all this is what it says about the future of presidential war powers.
Go on.
I think the future of a president's authority to wage war is going to depend less and less on the shaky legal justification, AUMF, Article 2, whatever, and more on just one single thing.
Edges.
Perceived effectiveness and safety. As technology like armed drones gets better and more accepted internationally and is seen as low risk to your own forces, critics are going to have a harder and harder time arguing against the method.
So they should focus on something else.
They should probably focus on the wisdom of the larger purpose for which force is being used in the first place. Because if Americans see a real threat and a response that looks clean and effective, it seems like political support for that executive action is almost guaranteed. And that's the real shift in modern presidential power.